Right now, Russia is actually backtracking on an earlier admission of widespread doping of its Olympic athletes. In an interview with the New York Times, the acting director of Russia's anti-doping agency called it an institutional conspiracy, the Russian doping. Officials now claim she was misquoted, but the Times is standing by its story and the quotes therein. Let's talk about it with Christopher Swift, a Georgetown University National Security Studies adjunct professor. Jared Max is sports reporter for Fox News Headlines 24/7 on Sirius XM Radio. You know, I wanted to open this segment with the startling, to me, admission from the Russians that they finally say, yes, we were doping, Jared, but now they're saying, well, we didn't exactly mean what we said.
For what it's worth, the New York Times reporter who took all these quotes did go to Twitter today and say all of the quotes in this story are accurate. I don't find it surprising that all of a sudden that there's some backtracking saying, oh, wow, well, we didn't exactly mean that, and there should not be any possible connection to the Russian state sponsoring any of this doping. It's no surprise that they've backpedaled on this big statement today.
Well, what surprised me, Christopher, is that they ever came out with a statement admitting it in the first place. I mean, one would think that, that this acting head of the anti-doping agency might be in fear of her job or something worse.
That's a good assumption, John. Look, it's not surprising in one sense. There is a ruling from, or an investigation from the World Anti-Doping Agency has pretty much laid out the facts here. The facts really aren't in dispute unless you happen to work at the press office at the Kremlin. And I think part of what we're seeing here is something that we see in Russian politics quite frequently. That is, the leadership is presented with a factual determination based on, science and investigations and all the like. And then it gets into the realm of advisors closest to Vladimir Putin, and immediately it's denied because of a possible connection to the highest levels in Russia. And that's a difficulty that, we have in the media, and it's a difficulty that ordinary Russians live with, trying to distinguish between the facts that are true and the facts that are right.
What does it say, Jared, about, the medals that have been won by Russian athletes in the Sochi Olympics and in other competitions? It just sounds like they have been doping their athletes summer and winter for years.
There's over 1,000 names who are implicated between 2011 and 2015. This is said to have been a program that was to be perfected by the Sochi Games. Started in 2012 at London, the 2013 Worlds in Moscow, then eventually 2014 in Sochi. What does it say, just from the layman, that there's probably a lot of cheating going on, that 33 medals that Russia won at the Sochi Games, the most of any country, well, how many of them are in doubt? How many of the 13 gold medals were legitimate? And John, for what it's worth, even let's look here in the United States. Did we take away any of Barry Bonds' home runs? Did we take away Mark McGwire's home runs? No, they're still in the record books. Just like when the NCAA penalizes a school and vacates wins, it's not like it never happened. As sports fans, it's almost like we say, all right, well, we saw the accomplishment. I guess they cheated, but whatever.
Well, Christopher, what's the bigger picture? I mean, people might kind of shrug it off and say, okay, so the Russians dope up their athletes. It doesn't mean that they are a bad actor when it comes to international affairs, or does it?
Well, it's symptomatic of a broader problem. And look, the Russians aren't the only ones that have this problem. Certainly the Chinese government has been accused of doing similar things. And when you look at independent sports federations in the West, be it professional baseball, be it the Tour de France, there's certainly plenty of doping to go around. But in the case of Russia, what makes this symptomatic is the desire to win, even at the cost of the truth. And that's kind of dangerous when you sort of get rid of all the other constraints on power in society. The things we take for granted in the West, the ability to have a conversation, conduct an independent investigation, let facts lead us to reasonable conclusions, don't necessarily play out the same way in Russia. That's very disturbing for Russia's conduct internationally, and it's very disconcerting for ordinary Russians, including the athletes that might be playing the game by the rules, but nonetheless discredited by virtue of their association with rule breakers.
So standards should apply to governments really equally. That's part of the lesson.
Facts and standards matter, and that's a lesson that everybody can take to heart.
Christopher Swift, Jared Max, thanks to both of you.
Thank you, John.